Fontaine was very difficult time for Genshin Impact, as it had very large amount of issues, much more significant than previous years. So I decided to go over all the major issues Fontaine had. Hello and welcome, I'm Lorgor, and today we will go over the major controversies that were happening during Fontaine patches from 4.0 to 4.8. Keep in mind that I will not go over the great content creator Genshin war. It is mostly irrelevant as it really doesn't involve the game that much. It's more about content creators going after each other's throats, so we are going to address the issues that were happening in the game and in the community itself. In regards to the game, of course. And with that being said, let's go over what actually happened. 4.0 until 4.3 were pretty much calm. You could call these patches calm before the storm, as these patches didn't really have that many issues except for one thing. 4.1 actually had quite an issue because of its Arc Conquest. Fortress of Merpeet part was very underwhelming for majority of players, but universally it wasn't the strongest part of the Arc Conquest. Aside from that one misstep with Fortress of Merpeet, the Arc Conquests from 4.0 to 4.2 were wonderful. They were, I would say, even the best Arc Conquest Genshin ever made. And then we had 4.3 patch, which was the filler patch, you could say, and it was the last patch, we could say, that was pretty much calm before the storm. Genshin was celebrating 3rd anniversary of the game. However, the reward was very underwhelming. We got 3 wishes for 3 years of loyalty. So basically what it means, we got 408 Remo gems in total. Meanwhile, for maintenance we are getting for in each patch 600. So basically we got literally nothing for it. Community then split into 2 different groups. One that praised the Hoyoverse for giving us at least something, and the other one that was against this whole idea and were trying to boycott Hoyoverse and Genshin Impact for giving us more than this almost like nothing like rewards. And the idea behind it is that if we will accept this little, they will not dare to give us more. They will try to give us less and less until we will get almost no rewards, which is the biggest flaw in the quote, better than nothing. Among the second group that was trying to boycott the reward system, there were some individuals or content creators, if you will, that were trying to speak to Chinese audience, to Chinese community, because that is the only community that Hoyoverse is actually listening to. After all, Chinese community holds some kind of results. Those results can be seen in the form of some buffs in regards to Zhongli, or reverting of some changes such as Novelette, about which I will talk a bit later, and especially increased rewards for 1st anniversary, which was another kind of shitshow. So that also answers the question, why would Global want to have support of Chinese players? Because they have results, meanwhile Global on its own with literally nothing, and we will see it in this video as well. And with that being said, let's move on to another controversy. Ever since the game launched, we wanted something like custom loadouts, where we could have the set on that set character, name it, and then try different combinations, and if anything, we can just go back with one single button. But unfortunately, it seems like Hoyo didn't get what we wanted. Instead, we got 2 different iterations of custom loadouts just in Fontaine in patch 4.4 and in patch 4.7, and both failed miserably. And it wasn't what we wanted. Instead, we can now get sets based on how many players are using the set at this very moment, and similar things in that, let's just say, nature. It isn't what we wanted after all. Maybe on the 3rd iteration during Natlan, or maybe even in Snezhnaya, we will get what we wanted. But as it stands for now, it was one big flop on Hoyo's part, because they totally missed the mark and they didn't give us what we actually wanted. Imaginarium Theater was the newest game mode that was released in patch 4.7. This game mode requires significant amount of characters of only certain elements. And if you are a player who is focusing on one reaction or on one type of element and their reactions, then you will be in quite significant disadvantage. Imaginarium Theater feels more of an investment check than really artifact check, as Spiral Abyss is. The issue players had with it is that because of this game mode, Spiral Abyss now has 1 month rotation. Although they increased the total reward by 200 gems, it still isn't for everyone, because not everybody has built characters of all elements. Some of them, just as I said before, play only certain elements, and that's where the issue started. You may feel left out because you cannot use your mono geo team, you have to use other things. But on the other hand, Imaginarium Theater feels more of an endgame mode that requires a bunch of built characters, and for that reason some of the players might view this as a problematic. Let's talk about Wuthering Waves for a bit. This game released at the end of May, but ever since the game was announced, Genshin noticed that it might be a threat to their game. So they put some significant changes so that the players will stay within the game and they will keep playing Genshin. They noticed that players are craving some kind of endgame feel, because as it was back then, Genshin didn't really have an endgame. And I wouldn't really count Spiral Abyss as enough when it comes to endgame. So they put some changes. First we saw artifact loadouts, then Imaginarium Theater, and finally we have the increased resin cap. This is one thing. Increased resin we got last time back during 1.1. Ever since then we really didn't get many things when it comes to resin, and they increased the cap by 40, which is the least amount of effort they did. And it didn't really make players happy, let's be honest. If they increased to, let's just say, 240 and reduced the recharge timer of it to, let's just say, 6 minutes from 8 minutes, and on top of that, if they released overcap for resin, overflow, whatever you wanna call it, then it could make some significant difference. But they did the least amount of effort to increase it, and because of that, players complained. Players complained because it was felt like nothing. Every new gacha game that is just releasing is starting instantly with 240. It's kind of funny to look back into the past when we started with 120. And Genshin is here for almost 4 years, and it still doesn't have even 240 resin. Meanwhile, new releases such as Zenless Zone Zero, Wuthering Waves, you name it, it has 240 just from the beginning. It's kinda unfortunate how behind Genshin at this very moment is. Chronicled Wish was one of the main features of patch 4.5. It was a banner that featured 6 characters and 6 different weapons. You could choose one of them to go for. Once you lose your 50-50, you will get that character or weapon that you chose. The catch is, the characters out there aren't the most exciting, as it offered 3 standard characters with Diluc, Mona and Jean, and 3 underwhelming limited banner characters with Albedo, Eula and Klee. Another catch is that if you lose 50-50 and you don't use it, you will not have a guaranteed character or weapon in the next Chronicled Wish. It will just go away, just like with regular weapon banner. For weapons, you could go for the most exciting probably, which are DS weapon, and the better one, Hunter's Path, Tighnari's weapon. The thing is that this banner lasted for just regular banner rotation, which means 21 days. So it basically means that if there was something you wanted, you were kinda pushed to use your Primo Gems, and in quite significant amount. The main issue is that you couldn't even save your lost 50-50 for guaranteed on another Chronicled Wish. So if you lost your 50-50 and you didn't have Primo Gems and you didn't want to spend money, then you were kinda screwed and you lost your gems in vain. So it felt for characters like very bad character banner, and for weapons, slightly better weapon banner. With that being out of the way, let's move on to another thing. During patch 4.1, Novelat was released as one of the featured characters on his banner. He was working in a way that you will use his charge attack and then spin with him to murder anyone, basically. So let's fast forward into the present time, when Hoyoverse decided to nerf him. This nerf happened approximately 10 months after his release. So, in a sense, this nerf really didn't make any sense. Chinese community especially didn't like this nerf. On global, I noticed that not many players talk about it, but for Chinese community, it was significant. They decided to report Novelat to the government, and within 24 hours of the nerf, it was once again reverted, and we have received one of the most generous compensation, one whole temple. This once again shows us the sheer power of the Chinese community in comparison to global. And speaking of global, let's talk about our last major issue that happened during Fontaine, although it is very much tied very closely to our next nation, Natlan. Back during patch 4.8, we have seen our roster of Natlan characters, and it posed some kind of issue for global players, because global players wanted to see Natlan, which is inspired by Latin America and Western Africa, that these characters will have much darker skins than the rest of Tevat, which isn't the case. There's numerous things we have to consider. On one part, it's the cultural appropriation of Latin America and Western Africa, because these cultures are then represented in just convenient manner. So it feels almost like what Ubisoft did with Assassin's Creed Shadows, where they just used what they felt fits their narrative. And it really feels very similar in my opinion. For that reason, this poses some kind of issue. On the other hand, we have the Chinese culture, which on one hand views dark skin as something imperfect, something dirty, and light skin on the other hand views as something perfect, beautiful, clean. And also we have to consider that Genshin is a Chinese game and their main audience are then Chinese. For that reason, they will try to satisfy more of their main audience rather than smaller global audience, which is for them kinda insignificant. On the other hand, we have also the issue with Sumeru, which is in nature very similar, although it had one major difference. Back then, we didn't have any trailer that showcased all of the characters. Instead, we had this leak from subreddit Genshin leaks, and it showcased numerous characters, and they looked all just like Mondstadt people, but with different outfits. And people were mad about it even back then, but then it was based on leaks, which didn't have the enough substance so that it could be pushed somewhere. Meanwhile now, it has. I don't think Hoyoverse will do anything about it, because their main audience are after all Chinese, and that's what they are aiming for. They are probably waiting for this another boycott to fall down, as it happened with all others, so we can do literally nothing about this. So the boycott will probably be in vain, just like numerous other boycotts the game had in the past who knows how many years. We went over all the major controversies Genshin Impact had for the past year, although there were some that I didn't speak a whole lot about, such as Arlecchino and her story quest being mostly spoiled by her animated short, or Emily's design not meeting players' expectations and it is more of a letdown, or even some events and Tinesleeve's Arc Conquest. At the end of the day, I decided to cover just the major issues, as they felt much more substantial and much more interesting than those minor issues, as it would be like, oh wow, one side didn't like this, the other side liked this. Wow, it doesn't feel that interesting to just talk about it. And I don't think it will have that much to offer to you. And with that being said, I'd like to at least express my hopes for Natlan. I hope that Natlan will have substantially less issues than Genshin had during Fontaine, although Genshin like always had some issues. But the competition wasn't as fierce as during this year, with release of Wandering Waves now, and other are on the way such as Project Mugen, Azure Amelia, and couple more. It will be quite difficult for Genshin to keep their place as #1 gacha, although some would say that it already lost their position. I hope that Natlan will improve the whole situation and it will be much better experience that we had in the past. But maybe I'm just coping and nothing really will change. Anyway, if you like this type of content, let me know by liking the video, subscribing. If you have something on your mind, just let me know in the comments down below. And with that being said, don't forget to have fun and I'll see you in the next one. See ya!